10:10. We'll get started. Before I start today, I just want to make an announcement that, and you'll see in your calendars this Friday, but that the speaker announced yesterday, and that is that he's appointed me chair of the committee and Fred Doucette as vice chair of the committee going forward. So,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yes. Well deserved, John.
Thank you. All right, now getting on with the business of the day, we'll start with the public hearing on HB 1410, and I'll ask Representative Tony Likas to come up. Yes.
Is there another member being appointed to the committee or?
Not at the present time. Representative Sanborn will stay on the committee as a
Okay.
committee member.
Thank you, that clarifies it.
Okay, thank you. I'm Representative Tony Likas, representing the District of Hillsborough 38, the towns of Hudson and Litchfield. And I'm introducing House Bill 1410. What I want to make a note, first of all, I noticed that after we amended it, there was a revised fiscal note, but the ones sitting out here don't have that. I don't know what the committee has, but the revenue reduction is dramatically less after the amendment, that the House made recently, it accepted from ED&A.
I don't think we have.
And it's
Yes, Representative.
it's on the top. It's amended 229 from the LBA at the top of the fiscal note.
I don't know if we have. Oh, here it is.
I printed it from the state website yesterday.
Representative, use your microphone, please.
They might have changed the amendment number when they put it into the calendar.
What's
If the
different?
amendment had a person's name on it, they put it
No,
for the
the
committee.
the difference is the fiscal note has different numbers in it. The one that I have versus what's sitting on the table out here. It's just, I didn't know which one you folks were looking
Oh
at.
dear. I have one that says 22924.
Okay. And the number for 2024 in revenue reduction is 23,825 to 0. But if so, that's the new one. Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. Okay, so this bill, as amended, does a number of things. It makes various changes, kind of follow up on some things that were missed in kind of the changes for occupational licensing last year. But the change that has a fiscal impact is removal of the licensing of the registration of medical technicians. And the committee did that because that whole thing is basically dysfunctional. I mean, Director Courtney can give you more details if you like, but nobody was interested in serving on the board. The board never met. As a result, they couldn't create any rules. I mean, it was completely, couldn't function at all. And so it's being eliminated. And as a result, according to the fiscal note, they're going to, not take in the registration fees, and there'll be some minor reduction in work, but it says it's not going to reduce costs. But if you have questions about the details of why we did it, or that aspect of the bill, I'll be glad to answer it. But
Just to get further clarification on the number, if we look at the last page, you were saying the medical technicians number of 23,825
excuse me.
on the last page of the bill
Yeah, where?
at the bottom. The
Well, where it says revenue in the table, for FY 2024, it says 23,825 to 0, depending on when the bill's passed.
the last page of the.
I mean,
it's the last page of the fiscal.
I can bring this up if you want to take a look at it. That would help.
This is the new one. Yours
Yeah,
is the
I think that
original.
We
if
just
I
got
may,
this.
the difficulty here is that some of us have one fiscal note and others have the other
Yeah,
fiscal.
I mean, the new
So
one,
the
the
ones that-
numbers are around, I think, a tenth as much or something.
Mine, which came off also out of, mine, which came out of, 2 nights ago, I think it was, the, internet, is labeled LBA 242690 and amended to 2924. Yours was the original fiscal note.
What I'm looking at is something that was on our desk this morning.
Right. And I noticed the ones that are set out today here on the table are the old one.
Oh, they are.
They have the
It's
old fiscal note, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she missed that it had been changed.
So you have the only copy of the new fiscal note then?
Yeah, I just brought one for myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have
I've got a
to,
copy of it.
you have a copy of,
You have a copy of it? Yeah.
can I see that for a second?
That's because I went to the internet to download all these bills.
Yeah.
So I could read them before today. Sort of read them.
And if you could just tell us briefly again why the huge decrease there.
Okay, the original bill eliminated the licensing of LNAs, licensed nursing assistants, because there's also a federal registration program, and the thought was that they could just be in that program and not require a separate license. I mean, we need more of them. They're not paid a lot, and we want to reduce the cost and the trouble to them. But it turned out there was a problem. The issue, we couldn't get rid of that one, at least at that time, because the growing number of them are hired by families to work in people's homes. And if we just had the federal legislation under the rules for that, we could not require a background check. It was felt that could be a problem. Speaking with Director Courtney, there may be a way around it that can actually be done without legislation, but you can ask her about that. I don't have the details. And then the other one was it got rid of the licensing for medical imaging technicians. And there's a lot more of those and the LNAs than there are of the regular medical technicians, which remained in the bill. And so the number of people being licensed that would be reduced, was a much smaller number than the original bill, which is why the impact is less.
Okay. Questions? Representative Ellery.
I'll get the question out early so that the commissioner can respond when she gets up here.
Thank you.
Will the agency OPL or the initials
Yep.
have the ability to continue to function effectively with reduced pay-in?
You can. I'm not the one to answer that question.
That's why I ask you, so somebody else could hear it.
Okay.
Representative Elman.
Oh, I don't know if this is proper here, but are we going to do anything about med techs? Which are the people that guy that poisoned?
Yeah,
all
I'm
of
familiar
these
with,
people?
there was a problem with hepatitis C, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know what is going to be done in the future. This isn't working. Maybe, in the future, some other way of handling it can be found, but they all work in medical facilities where the medical facilities are licensed, I believe, or at least, they have an employer who should be overseeing what's going on. They're not out practicing on their own. But, there wasn't a solution that might work that was suggested while we were dealing with the bill.
Thank you.
Anybody? Yes. Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase some of this. Assuming that this board, the board that deals with the licensed medical technicians, is no longer looking at people in that profession, what kind of education or other requirements or skills will be examined and by whom to make sure that those folks are actually competent to do the work that they're being asked to do?
I understand. First of all, it's registration for them, not licensing.
Sorry.
That's fine. And second of all, because they could never get more than one person to serve on the board never had a quorum, it couldn't meet, it couldn't create rules, so it never had any requirements at all. But what's, existed before and has been going on and would continue is that, their employer, which is a medical facility, would have some requirements for if they're going to hire them. But medical technician they're not, it's a wide range of things. Director Courtney might be able to give you a better idea, but it's basically anybody who has access to patients and might have access to drugs. Not that they could, supposed to be handling them, but they might be in the same room with them. And that includes people that like clean the OR and clean the ER. And it's a range of things. So there's not going to be one set of training for them. At least that's my understanding.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Follow up?
So in what you're saying is that the responsibility for making sure that the people who are hired in these roles are competent and safe and all of that will be the people who hire them, not some outside agency.
Correct. That's
Thank
my
you.
understanding. Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, Director Courtney might be able to fill in some more details.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the updated fiscal note. Okay, next, the next pink card I have is, I'm having trouble reading it. Lindsay Linzelli. Sorry for butchering the name.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lindsay Courtney. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. We are not taking a position on this bill, but I'm here to offer and answer any questions that you may have regarding specifically the financial impact, but as well as the policy underpinnings of this bill. In terms of whether we can absorb the decrease in revenue, I would say yes. This registration was created back in 2015. It's not an actual profession, as Representative Lakes mentioned. It's just anybody who is not licensed who may come into contact with controlled drugs and patients. And so it's somewhat vague, somewhat difficult to define. And as a result of that, people don't feel like they want to participate on the board. This has been our understanding, because it's not a profession that has specific requirements, specific training. It's just anybody who may come into contact with drugs. So they have not had a quorum in over 2 years, have not had a meeting in over 2 years. And the decision was made to essentially repeal the registration requirement. Because they have not had meetings, there has not been a lot of staff support. And because it's a strict registration, there has not been a lot of staff support. The fee that was charged was previously required by statute, so there was no opportunity to modify that fee. And so what I would say to your question, Representative Woolery, is yes, we can definitely absorb the decrease in revenue. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have, but that's the gist of it.
Thank you, Representative Ellery.
To assuage, this is a policy actual question, but just to assuage some concern that may exist. Each one of the facilities that hires one of these individuals would then, if registration ceases, would then be responsible for establishing the policies and procedures to any individual coming in contact with any kind of medicine. And then the liability would shift from the registrant to the facility.
Yes, it's typically required as part of their accreditation. The accrediting bodies usually require at least suspicious-based testing, for example, if there's concerns about diversion. This is the issue that this particular registration was trying to capture. The other thing that the policy committee considered was the fact that we've had registration, but because we haven't had a quorum, even if we have received complaints, which we have not been able to actually remove people from the registry and actually notify the public of harm because there's been no board to function. So practically, it's been completely dysfunctional. It hasn't been operating. That's what the policy committee also considered.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
I have no other pink cards. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on HB 1410? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on HB 1410. We have 3 minutes. Representative Almy, obviously, when you get a chance, no rush, fill out a pink card, please.
Right. And in the absence of the prime sponsor, Representative Popovici Moeller, no. Well, I'm opening the House Bill 1655, and have nothing to say about it except that I think Representative Fellows has something to say about it. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Fellows.
Yes. I've read this bill, and also just to let you know, I worked at the Department of Education for 32 years, and so I'm familiar with a lot of their operations. This bill, the first section of this bill adds to the responsibilities. This section, the first part, the section that's being amended is actually rulemaking. So it's adding to the department the process of doing criminal history record checks for people who apply for certification, usually as teachers, but it could be any kind of employee of a school district. And that's something that people have been asking for quite a while, because it's a kind of tedious process for the SAU trying to do that. If they have one person who can do that at the department, that would be great. The second part, starting with line 11, has to do with creating a new fund, a non-lapsing fund. And what's interesting about this is that they already have such a fund. It's been in existence for a long time. I just have to speculate on why this is even in here. I know that they reorganized the department about 6 or 7 years ago. So I think they originally had 4 divisions, but they changed the responsibilities of the division. They sorted them a different way. And so this is probably, to some people in the department, this looks like a new responsibility for one of those bureaus. So I think that's why they probably put it in here. But I spoke to both the state treasurer and Dina, I think her last name is Call. She works in admin services, and she keeps track of the dedicated funds. And she said that it would be better not to create a new fund, but to just alter some of the characteristics of how that dedicated fund is listed in the directory of dedicated funds. I know that I looked at the report that the department files for dedicated funds, and for this one, it has the RSA reference is incorrect. So that's something that can be fixed without doing it in this bill. Dina also told me that the Department of Education is up for their 5-year review of dedicated funds, and that can be addressed when she does that this summer, which I think would be a good idea, because I think that this is not the only fund dedicated fund that they have that needs a little bit of fixing. I mean, the funds are there and they've been used for decades, but they may want to straighten out some of the titles. This particular one has 2 different titles within the context of that dedicated fund report. In the index, it has one name, and the report that's filed by the department has a slightly different name. So they can address all of those issues that are probably related to their reorganization this summer.
All right. So you believe this bill is unnecessary?
I think we should probably check with the education committee, but I think they probably need the first part of it, but not the second part. So they need to, they need B, well, which wouldn't be a 1 anymore. It could just be a B, but they don't need the part that has to do with a new dedicated fund.
What about the first part that has processing of criminal history record checks? Does that cost additional money?
I think they probably need it, but I would need to check, we would need to check on that to be sure. This section is actually, you can't tell by looking at the bill, but this is actually rulemaking. So I don't know the status of that. I do know that the issue of criminal records check and having the Department of Education do it instead of individual school districts and SAUs has been an issue for several years. So my guess is that the intent is to say the Department of Education is going to do it, but I have not had an opportunity to verify that.
Okay, thank you. Representative Platt.
Is there anybody here who's going to put an amendment into the, what you think the bill should be? If not, why don't we just ITL it?
So,
Yes.
so I would be willing to do an amendment. I just need some kind of understanding of the criminal records check being in rules to find out if that's needed.
Okay,
But
yeah, I
not
mean,
that, but I would delete the second part.
all right. Well, to your point, if that technically can be in, or is in, or can be in rules, then this whole thing is not necessary. Representative Leapley.
I was just wondering if, when we have a work session, if we could invite a member of the department to make sure we're on the right track to answer questions.
We can certainly try. Yes, Representative Almy.
Yes, Representative, the representative gave us, gave me, two possible, dedicated fund numbers, 123 and 321, wasn't it? And neither of them is that. 123 is Certified Program Fund for RSA 332E, and I just went to that, and it's water treatment plant operators. So, and the other one is very late in the list and has already been repealed.
So the numbers are 1, 2, and 3. And
Okay.
I got the order of them wrong, but they're both, those are both Department of Education funds,
So
and
it
one of
might
them
be
is the
132.
certification one. It could be 312 and 213.
Well, anything starting with 3 is
It's not
in
it.
the last few years. And you said it's been there a long time. So that's another thing.
You know, so my notes are back here. Let me see.
1, 2, 3 is in acquisition. No, sorry, I'm not.
Well, we can,
Yeah.
I guess,
We can work on this later.
yeah, we can work on this
So
later.
I'm just coming back from a doctor's appointment, so I don't have my notes here yet. Well, I guess we're not in a hurry because we can't hear anything else until 11, right?
That's
Okay.
quite true.
Yeah. And there doesn't appear to be anyone else.
It's 11:15?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we've only got 15 minutes for this one.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if it's not here. It's not that one. It's that one. That one.
Oh, goodness, 132 is also
So,
facilities. What police-
Representative Ames.
I just wanted to say that it's pretty obvious in support of Representative Leapley's suggestion that we need a knowledgeable person from the Department of Education to explain what's needed and what's not needed. I don't think, you've probably got it exactly right, Representative Fellows, but let's get it from the department.
Yeah, I don't,
Okay. Does anybody have anything else?
I don't have it with me. You
All
just
right.
go- Well, you can, if you're looking at the dedicated funds report, just search for the word certification.
Yeah, that 123 is a certification program fund, but it refers you to RSA 332E, which is water stuff. Now, maybe the referral is wrong to which place it's going.
Well, there's inconsistencies between the index and the reports that the department filed at the end. So you think is it called what's the number for certification?
123 is a certification program fund.
So that's the one we're talking about.
Except, yeah, so
So the
in the
RSA is wrong.
RSA, it's in 612, it's referring it to this water fund.
Right.
So
That's
that may
like,
be wrong.
Okay. Well, given the uncertainty there, I think I'm assuming there's no one else to testify. There's no other pink cards, and therefore I will close the public hearing on 1655.
Can't search.
Yep.
okay. Not have 1655. This is
Search these statutes. This is ours because it's dedicated funds. That's what it says.
the other one's 312, 123. If you when I put in 123,
And then
And
we
it
get
goes-
132, and it's also a water program.
so the
That says it's a water
Did you
program.
print it out?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. I
so
was
we'll
gonna
just
print it out,
do
but then
one.
I
Talk about one.
rushed
two,
out
three.
without it. I only
So
printed.
Meeting at 9:30. Which one was that?
So
That
if
is
you search on it and you go down to the bottom of the report, you find that one-page thing that the department submits.
Yeah,
And the RSA that it's referred to in there is, at least it's a Department of Education RSA, but it's not, it's to a division. It refers to a division that I know is the one that used to be where certification was.
yeah.
But
I
they
understand that.
redid that whole division and now it belongs somewhere else.
Yeah.
But mostly, they've got a certification fund. They don't need a. I was rushing back here trying to be here for that one, and I sent them an email last week asking them about that bill. You would think that would trigger somebody to be here, wouldn't you?
Or at least clean it up or both.
Well, I think they don't know.
Yeah, that probably happened. Yeah, I'll leave you one.
Okay, the time being 10:47, we will get going on, I will open the public hearing on HB 1198. And first up,
I had to get up again for you. Just want you to know.
recognize Representative Horrigan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from the town of Stratford County, the town of Durham, which is the entirety of Stratford County District 10, which actually does not have a state liquor store in its town, although we do have one next door in Lee. So this bill sailed through Commerce without much controversy. It's not particularly complicated. So currently, the state liquor commission can and does keep stores open on main routes where traffic is busy on any Sunday or legal holiday, with the three exceptions of Easter, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And the dates of Thanksgiving and Christmas are clearly established in existing law, so we pretty much know everybody knows when those holidays are. Easter's a little bit trickier. First of all, it's not actually technically a legal holiday. It moves around from year to year, and actually different religious groups observe it on different Sundays, which I guess, and the Liquor Commission uses the most common date, which is observed by most Christian denominations. And this year, if I remember correctly, that's March 31st. The law doesn't have any definition of Easter, and that bill makes no attempt to deal with that. That won't be needed if this bill becomes law, actually, because there's only one other statute that refers to Easter. But of course, this is the Money Commission. It's so the main point is it's enabling legislation. It merely gives the commission the option to keep stores open on those 3 days. The commission is free to keep the stores closed instead. And the full-time employees would make 1.5 times their regular pay, and all the other work rules would still apply. So this is the Money Committee, so the main thing is the Liquor Commission will make more money if HB 1198 passes. So sales on Easter Sunday, and I think this is reflected in the fiscal note, are likely to be similar to those on other March or April Sundays. Historically, the store's gross sales average about $1 million on those Sundays, with labor costs averaging about $53,000, and that's pretty much the only cost of keeping the store open, since they have to keep the lights on and the air conditioning on, regardless of whether there's any customers in the store. So the potential, so that that's like a pretty big. So there's a big fiscal upside to being open on Easter Sunday. The potential profits from opening at Thanksgiving, Christmas are harder to predict, but sales leading up to those 2 days are robust. That's what it says in the fiscal note. So it should be financially worthwhile opening on those two holidays, even if sales were as little as 5.3% of what they would be on a normal day. And I think they should be much higher than 5.3. And also, this also enables the commission to serve the public better by giving them more opportunity to buy wine and spirits. This would mostly probably be people who are traveling and need to pick up a few bottles of for responsible enjoyment at the holiday get-togethers, although it may also be useful since some restaurants are open on that day. Some caterers happen to be working on that day, catering holiday celebrations, and that probably makes life a little bit easier for them if they need to, if they discover they have less wine or spirits than they need to serve their customers. So I think this bill will make a significant amount of money for the state liquor commission. So so from the point of view of the Ways and Means Committee's concerns, I think this is like pretty obviously a bill that you should pass and send on to the Senate. So, but I'd be happy to take any questions if you want.
Thank you. Before I take questions, I'll just remind the committee that this bill and I believe all of them that we are hearing today are second committee bills.
Yes.
The policy has been passed, so whether you like this bill or not, the policy has been passed previously. So we are focused only on the financial aspects of this bill and the following bills. And now I'll represent Representative Platt.
This is a money question.
Yeah.
I understand that there may be a revenue increase potential.
Yes, of course.
But wouldn't being open on those 3 holidays just suck some revenue from other days around the holidays?
That may be the case, but in practice, the Liquor Commission stays open as many days as it can. So they're obviously, their analysis of the business seems to indicate that they would make more sales staying open more days. So that's, I believe all the major stores, and this actually, it says certain stores, this is actually probably most of the stores. So they do I believe they do mostly stay open 7 days a week if they can, because they figure they'll sell more product if they stay open,
Representative Almy.
every day.
Thank you. But
Yeah.
you've read the original fiscal note,
Yeah.
which is still a fiscal note.
Yes.
And the original fiscal note says that the Liquor Commission believes that they can lose money by doing this.
The
That
way,
their expenditures are going to increase because they're going to have to keep people at time and a half there.
yes.
Which is on apparently more than they are paying people for normal
Yeah.
days except Sundays. And also that they don't really believe that very many people are going to be wandering around and making a last minute purchase because they've always made them in the days before and after.
Well, I was not involved in writing the fiscal notes, so I can't speak too much with their assumptions. They're being, I think they're being cautious because they knew last time we introduced it, it became controversial on the other body that we don't talk about. But I think how they describe the labor costs, that's a relatively small amount of what they would sell. It's a business decision that the Liquor Commission, like any other retailer, should be free to make for itself. And in fact, they stay open on all the other legal holidays other than Thanksgiving and Christmas, and they also stay open on every Sunday aside from Easter Sunday. So I think their analysis of the business is that it's worthwhile keeping the stores open as many days as possible, even if that does mean labor costs, which I think are not really a huge part of their business. Their main cost is actually just the cost of maintaining the stores and also like the cost of buying the product, not so much the salaries that the liquor store clerks make when the store's open. So that's
Follow-up?
my belief.
Follow-up, thank you.
Follow-up.
Did the Liquor Commission come to the hearing?
I seem to recall that they did to the Commerce Committee hearing. So they you can that would probably be reflected in the bill file, which I don't have a copy of, and I'm not sure if there's anybody here to speak to it, but they did come to, and they were, I think, they certainly did not try to dissuade me, or also there were other members of the committee, because this is identical to bill that was passed in a previous session as amended by the Commerce Committee. So
Representative Fellows, followed by Representative Platt.
Yes, and so one of the concerns is what would overtime cost, because the employees that would be in the store would be working overtime. These are the regular SEA union people that would be impacted by this. This is something that would have to be addressed in the labor contract.
yes,
So I'm wondering if they used time and a half for work on a Sunday, but I think that it's possible either they have, or it could be negotiated, if they're going to work on a holiday and it's one of these major holidays that they may be entitled to more than that. They get time and a half for overtime, but they're also it's on a major holiday, and that could cost even more. So did you hear any discussions about that issue?
that was not discussed. I will point to the fact on other legal holidays, the Liquor Commission has made a business decision to keep most of the larger stores open. So they must believe the additional labor costs offsets the is more than sufficient. The revenues from having the clerks in the store are more than sufficient to justify having the clerks there. Obviously, this is an issue that has to be discussed in the labor contract, and they do have a strong union. I mean, it's a fair, I think it's generally considered a good place to work, but they do have a strong union. They'll discuss it. This is merely enabling legislation, which enables the Liquor Commission to, suggest having the stores open those 2 days. That I can't speak to whether what would happen in the any contract negotiations between the Liquor Commission and the SEA, but
Representative Platt.
Yes, to counter the question I made earlier, this only, the law says, if this passes, the commission may in its discretion open those days. So I suppose if this passes, the liquor commission could try a few stores, see what the revenue impact is, see if the revenue impact is higher than what they lose the previous days, and if it's worth it, keep it doing it. If not,
Yes.
they don't have to, right?
Exactly. So it's up to them to make the business decision, and I'm sure they'll give it. I'm sure they won't. I'm sure they'll look at the data if they do start opening stores on those 3 days. They'll look at the data from to see if it's worthwhile to do it the next year or not. So
Thank you. Representative Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has happened in the past where Representative Platt has spoken or addressed the question that I would like to do. So, but how many stores? I thought maybe if this was like a liquor commission's policy that all stores would have to honor, opening on all the holidays if we go in that direction. I didn't think stores had that discretion.
well, I can't. I guess I'm not an expert in exactly how the state liquor commission organizes its stores. I mean, they're all so that I can't argue exactly, but I do know they are opening more stores and keeping them open. They seem to be keeping them open as long as they can keep them staffed. So they do seem to be making a decision to have more stores, newer stores, larger stores, and to have to keep them sufficiently staffed. So I don't think they're not. I don't think they're closing stores because of the labor costs per se. So I think they're in an expansion mode. So I don't.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily the best person to answer that question. So
Representative Orrs, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Horgan, for being here. I am, let's see, Representatives Platt and Bolton have already taken the thunder out of what I wanted to ask. So what I was wondering is if, do you think selling additional spirits on spiritual holidays would enhance the spirits? You don't have to answer that.
no, I
Thank
don't
you.
have an answer for that.
We could have a spirited debate about that.
All right, Representative Fellows.
So one of the things I see when I read this, it says like right now, full-time employees are not obligated to work on Sunday or these 3 holidays. It's voluntary if they want to work on Sundays. But you, by crossing out, this, how you're amending the bill, you're saying that they're not obligated to work on Sundays, but they would be obligated to work on Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas because you're crossing out those words, correct?
Well, I think we're just the way I interpret it. The way I interpret it is that this has this bill has passed the House before it came halfway to passing the other body, but I think what that means is just places those 3 days on the same. So for places Easter Sunday on the same. So the law that applied to all the other 51 Sundays of the year would apply to Easter Sunday, and then the law that applies on all the other legal holidays would also apply to those 2 holidays. So I don't think it changes. So I think those. So I don't think it changes anything in the law or the labor contract necessarily, based beyond what already exists for all the other holidays and all the other Sundays. So.
Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment on Representative Fellows' statement. Following the stricken language, there is a sentence that says, although full-time employees shall be given the option of working, no such employee shall be required to work on such days. So employees will not be forced to work on those days. I'm assuming that the Liquor Commission, which seems to be doing a pretty good job of managing the finances of the commission, unless they have any serious objection to this, and I'm not noticing any yet, at least, then there shouldn't, from my perspective, there shouldn't be any reason to turn this down, as it is simply enabling legislation. It is not a requirement.
Representative Sodi.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any information from other states that are open on these holidays? How much money they're bringing in on those dates?
Well, frankly, no. We're one of the few states that has state liquor stores. Of course,
Well, I mean, but on the private businesses that would be open on those states.
I haven't contacted any private businesses. I mean, I have noticed anecdotally that liquor stores, well, our neighboring state of Massachusetts has all private liquor stores, and most of them do stay open on Sunday. I don't believe they used to have blue laws in Massachusetts, but they don't. But I think most of those two stay open as many days as they can, just like the State Liquor Commission has been in the practice of doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on HB 1198? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on HB 1198. Okay, I'll now open the public hearing on HB 1293. And I'll recognize Representative Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to offer House Bill 1293 FN to the committee. And doesn't appear there's a fiscal note specific, so.
Mr. Chairman.
The last. Yes, Representative Elmy.
I at least am in possession of the fiscal note that was put up on 2/29/24, which says the legislative budget assistant states that this bill is amended by the House has no fiscal impact on any state, county, and local expenditures or revenue. And I also scanned through it, and it's about a commission at this point, I think. But no, it's just agricultural definitions, and there is no dedicated fund.
On the last page of the fiscal note here, it says decrease of $0 to $127,000.
And that is the old fiscal note.
That's the old fiscal note.
That's the
Okay.
old one. Yeah, she just handed it, we just,
Did she hand those out too?
received, the fiscal note that's amended 2/29/24.
I didn't get that,
Oh,
but, it may be in these
Yeah, it
things?
just came.
Oh, well, then it's not in those things. Huh.
It's somewhere here.
I got it off the internet 2 days ago.
No, it's I picked it up.
Oh,
okay. Yes, that is something that we received this morning.
Ah.
It says the Office of Legislative Budget Assistant states this bill, as amended by the House, has no fiscal impact on the state, county, or local expenditures on revenue.
right,
That simplifies things greatly.
yes. So we have half an hour.
Wow, that you just can't tell sometimes. All right, well, I'm going to close the public hearing on HB 1293. The next hearing doesn't start until 11:30.
The other one that is like this is 1709, by the way.
That is correct. 1709. That's scheduled for 12:15. that has, no longer has a fiscal note.
Yeah. It's too bad it wasn't.
It's too
the
bad I
one
don't
at
have the order
12:30.
reversed there. I know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just to mention on 1709, I do have an amendment for technical correction because the effective date was omitted, so I'll pass that out now.
Okay.
Oh.
Thank you.
Interesting. There is an effective date on it. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yes.
All right. This is actually, the handout is actually for HB 1565.
Oh, yeah. This actual take effects. That's great.
Takes effect. I suppose you might imply that that's upon passage, but
I think it should be 63 days.
And for 1565, we all got handed out a new fiscal note as well. And we also got a new one for 1198. Oh. Oh, no, we didn't. This is Horgan's testimony. We got a new one for 1611. Which looks like it may not have a fiscal impact. That's the one after the forest carbon, but it is a little confusing, the fiscal note.
Michael Haley.
It doesn't look like we have anyone here to introduce the bill.
Maybe he can.
Well, no, he's not. You have to be a state rep. Yes.
Yeah.
No, you need to go to the front. Well, would someone like to? All right. Representative Doucette's going to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce House Bill 1303 FN for the committee's consideration.
Thank you. Representative Ellery.
Mr. Chair, I had asked Mr. Lambert over in Legislative Research to give us some background on this. I forwarded it to you. You may wish to forward it to the committee or not. It's up to you. But primarily what this is the probate judge said that this should be a legislative action because the state was involved. And Rich did some further research and came up and said that historically the general court handled intestate decisions regarding the disposition of funds. This is merely a disposition of fund. It doesn't do anything other than give money to where the guy wanted it to go, which includes the state. So,
Okay, thank you. I do have another pink card here. Michael Haley from New Hampshire DOJ.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee staff asked our office to attend this hearing just to provide any background that's necessary. I have some written explanation because our office was involved in the underlying matter. Our office, I'm Michael Haley, the acting director of charitable trusts at the Department of Justice. Our office is involved in probate estates that have charitable bequests. This particular estate, Mr. Tekeste Berhanu died without a will, so it was unusual for us to be involved in this. However, the administrator of his estate was his good friend and wanted to have the proceeds of his estate go to a charitable purpose. And the judge asked us to become involved to determine if there was a way to achieve that through the probate process. We reviewed it and found that RSA 561(1) provides that if someone dies intestate without any living family within the fourth degree, that the money goes to the state. And so in order to have that money be directed to a particular purpose, the legislature would need to be the body that made that decision. So that the judge entered an order to that effect. And I understand that the executor or the administrator of his will worked with the representative to draft this bill, and this is the result of those efforts. So I'm available if there are any questions about that underlying proceeding, but our office is not taking a position on this legislation.
Okay. Thank you. And some of those comments are in line with what Representative Ellery had found out from Mr. Lambert. So that's good to hear. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Fellows.
I just have a technical question about the process, because this is not amending any RSA, which is what we usually see for bills. So is this called a chapter law? And like, how is it recorded in record? Because we're going to vote on it.
That's a little bit outside of my area of expertise. I understand this to essentially be an appropriation, that money has come into the estate from Mr. Berhanu's estate. He had about $131,000, I believe, when he passed. And so this is simply appropriating that money to a particular purpose, in this case, the DHHS Refugee and Resettlement Office.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for
Yes.
Mr.
Mr. Haley?
Yeah.
I guess we do have one more question. Yes,
in
Representative Chambers.
reading the DRA methodology, will money from this settlement will the DOJ be paid from that monies coming to administer this?
So our office is not receiving any money. We're not in, we wouldn't be receiving anything. The money would go from his estate. So the executor would cut a check to the treasury. It would go into general funds, and this is appropriating out of general funds to the DHHS office.
Okay. Now I think we're done. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on HB 1303? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on HB 1303. We now have about 8 minutes until the next hearing,
Good.
so that Representative Plitt can finish. What is this? 15. Those done? Yeah. 15, 17, 15, 17. We don't have anyone to introduce the bill again. Okay, the time being 11:47, I'm going to open the public hearing on HB 1517. And it doesn't, doesn't look like I have anyone to introduce the bill.
Yeah. I will.
Representative Doucette's already going up there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, again. I'd like to offer for consideration of the committee House Bill 1517 FN.
Okay, I do have some other pink cards. I have Bruce Knurr and Keen Meng Wong from New Hampshire DRA. I'll have you both come up at the same time.
Good morning. My name is Keen Meng Wong, Tax Policy Counsel with the New Hampshire Department of Revenue.
My name is Bruce Knurr. I'm the Municipal Supervisor at the Department of Revenue.
The department does not take a position on this bill. Right now, what's coming around to you is the fiscal note quick guide, which is the quick guide of the fiscal note that was prepared by the department when it was first introduced. So I'll not read through the fiscal note quick guide, but essentially what the department has read the bill is trying to accomplish is to take any excess monies from the games of chance in excess of the $6.6 million and use that excess money to reduce the SWEP calculation of the $363 million. Upon reviewing this bill, the department found that there are certain areas that might be of concern that might potentially help improve the bill. First thing is that the bill does not clearly stipulate the date range of the payments that would be deposited into the education trust fund, and so the department having to create or calculate the tax rate to arrive at the $363 million will need specific information as to what amount would be in excess of the $6.6 million and how that amount would be calculated. So would that information be coming directly from Treasury, or would that be a calculation that was to be done by the department? So that is not clear on the bill itself. It would definitely be beneficial to the department if that is made clear, if this bill is to pass. And if that information was to come from another party, let's say from Treasury, the department would request that maybe a timeline be provided in the bill to state when the information will be provided to us to perform the calculation. The preferred date would be early September, hopefully maybe by September 1, so that we can start preparing the calculation. And we'll be happy to take any questions.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the DRA needs to know at some year in the future, if we pass this bill, DRA needs to know how much to reduce the SWEP warrant by. And so the question, one question is, when is that known? And my guess is the Department of Education would probably have to tell you that, and they'd have to be telling you that for what happened the year before. Is that you're not how you see it?
I was thinking that probably the information will come from the Treasury as opposed to Department of Education, but I'm not certain because it's talking about the deposits into the game. There's a specific fund for the game of chance, and I believe that would be information that will come from Treasury.
Representative Platt.
I'm having trouble understanding. Let's say it was 6.6 million consistently, you knew that. This would reduce SWEP by 6.6 million, so it would not, okay. What would it do?
No, according to the language of the bill, it will be reducing the 363 million by anything in excess of the $6.6 million.
Given that, let's say there is an excess of, say, $1 million. So reduce the SWEP by $1 million. That reduces the revenue from SWEP. Does it also reduce the amounts going back to the towns and cities as a result of that reduction in revenue?
Yes, I believe, yes, that's correct, yeah.
Representative Almy.
Did you try to find out what the amount that has been coming out of these games of chance? It's a narrow sector. Has looked like for the last 10 years, say? Or you're just assuming that it's going to grow?
Yeah, we did not look through the history of the game of chance revenue. I believe through I believe reading the bill, I think the 6.6 million was either the budgeted amount or was the last fiscal year's amount of the revenue from game of chance. I'm not sure if I don't know what was done in the past in developing this bill, whether
Fortunately, we do have lottery behind you.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. There may actually be two. Where this 6.6 million, whose pocket is it going to be coming out of? Is it going to be coming out of the owners? Is it going to be coming out of the Gambling Commission? Because there's a pot of money. There'll be $6.6 million less under this proposal. Who's not getting it?
I don't believe that there is a transfer of money from the excess of $6.6 million. I believe it's just an accounting to reduce the 363 million by the number in excess of 6.6. I don't believe there's any kind of transfer from one fund to another fund.
Mr. Chairman, follow
Yes, follow up.
I'm trying to. The amount going into SWEP would be reduced by this amount, which would be coming out of games of chance. Correct?
That's. I don't believe I can answer that question. According to the bill, it doesn't say that the money will be coming out of the games of chance. It just says that the amount that's in excess of $6.6 million is used to reduce the 363 million calculation.
Okay. I may need to ask someone else this question. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Spilsbury.
So isn't it the case that all of the funds from the Lottery Commission currently go into the Education Trust Fund? So isn't the Education Trust Fund the answer to the question? So because this takes anything in excess of 6.6 million that's a credit against the amount to be collected from the municipalities through the property tax. It's a wash.
Yes, sir. The,
It just-
the bill, I think, states that it's still going, those revenues to the education trust fund. It's the excess above 6.6 million that is a number that is coming to DRA so that we can raise, instead of 363 million in that example of a million, excess.
So by a number, you mean it's an accounting adjustment, as
Right.
Keene had suggested. It's not
Right.
an actual transfer of funds.
Right.
Right. Okay. That's how I understood it too.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Fellows?
Yes, I'm trying to think about when you look at the Education Trust Fund as a whole, how would this money be specifically identified on a separate line? I'm just thinking a lot of things, a lot of different programs are funded out of the Education Trust Fund. And this is kind of it's kind of saying a little slice of what's going into the education fund will be used for this one very specific, use. And if somehow that needs to be identified within the fund.
Representative Fellows, I would, from our perspective in municipal, we're looking for that accounting number so that the next swept warrant or warrants in total would raise, in this hypothetical, $1 million less, apportioned out to all the municipalities. It's gaming revenue that's going to be in the Education Trust Fund, at least as I would understand it, but it's not going to be $1 million raised through the swept tax, the property tax. So what happens to the monies in the Education Trust Fund coming in from the gaming revenues is then, it's not DRA's affair. You were right. It would be education and the law dictating how those funds are then appropriated out and so forth. But this looks to me like just a change from $1 million on swept to $1 million into the education trust fund from the gaming revenue. But again, it's mechanics for the municipal bureau, and really our interest was in the timing of that piece of data and the amount, and the determination in the statute as to who is going to create that calculation.
Representative Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So if I'm understanding this correctly, I would assume the intent of this bill would be to lessen the tax burden on the taxpayer downstream. But what I'm hearing in the testimony is if the dollars aren't in the education trust fund, and they go to swept, it's kind of a wash, accounting wise. If you have those funds there, it's not going to affect the swept rate. I mean, does this piece of legislation have the wanted effect? I mean, the legislative intent, I'm reading into it a little bit, but it's kind of murky here.
Thank you for the question, Representative. I don't think we are in a position to talk about the intent of the bill. That might be the sponsor might be able to be more geared for that. But this is how we've interpreted the bill and how it's going to work.
Follow up?
Okay, let me make that assumption, okay? And I'm asking you, will that, if my intent is to lower the property tax of property owner, the swept end of things, shifting these dollars from the statewide, from the education trust fund to swept, is it gonna have my intended effect, in your opinion?
Again, sir, I'm not entirely certain what the intent might have been, but I believe that I can say this. If DRA is told that there is $1 million of gaming revenue in excess of the 6.6 million, we'll set the warrant to raise $362 million. And if you're paying that property tax, all of it, I know this is a hypothetical, you're going to pay less on your swept tax on your tax bill.
Representative Platt.
What happens now to any excesses in the education trust fund? Does it accumulate it? Does it off? What happens to it?
Representative Platt, I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that question about the funds at the state level and the education trust fund.
All right. I'm going to let Representative Almy answer it.
Thank you. If there is a surplus left at the end of the year, the Finance Committee can kidnap it for the general fund or send it on. And if they do, then it goes to the rainy day fund, probably.
Thank you. Representative Ames.
This isn't really a question. Well, I'll start with this. If you, with your $1 million hypothesis, then you're working with 362 million instead of 363, and you then apply your calculator to the situation and distribute the money. Well, before you do that, you somewhere in there you determine a statewide rate, right? An equalized rate. And right now it's somewhere about 1.12 or 1.10 or something like that. Anyway, it's very low. And when you go down and you take $1 million and try to spread it out across all our communities, it's not going to be very visible. It's going to be a small amount of money, except for the biggest places like Manchester. It might be visible there. Am I correct in saying that?
Representative Ames, I'm not sure how to answer that question. Is it visible? It would be if you compared the last 363 apportionment to 362. It filters down, starts out with the dollars raised in each municipality, and that in turn is, as you know, apportioned down to every single taxpayer. So, but 1 million over 363 million, I'm not sure what percent that is, but
Yeah.
it is.
Representative Elberger.
Being the non-math genius here, what I'm getting from this is that the difference is 1.8%. If you divide 363 million, if you go the other way, it turns out to be under 2% in terms of the impact on the statewide education trust fund. So the impact on a tax bill is going to be, it will be visible, but I'm not sure noticeable.
Representative Platt.
Actually, it's 0.2%. 1 divided by 363 is 0.002, which is 0.2%. 0.27%.
So fairly negligible. Representative Fellows.
So let's talk another hypothetical. I know it's never going to happen, but suppose the amount of money raised from these games of chance turned out to be $370 million. Then there'd be no statewide property tax, correct?
So it's 370 million in excess of $6.6 million. Yeah. So according to the language of the bill, you'll need the 363 minus whatever excess. If the excess is 370, yeah, I would think that is the answer.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no more pink cards. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on HB 1517? Representative Almy?
I would like to see on the lottery tell us how much is actually coming in for these games of chance. They're severely limited in the definitions to the traditional games of chance before anything changed.
Okay.
And we don't tax them much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Charlie McIntyre and Valerie King from the lottery, here to answer questions. So from FY23, the games of chance revenue after operating expenses was approximately $5.38 million. That was the highest year which had been realized in those revenues, and that was due to the increased bet limit.
Representative Fellows?
Yes, thank you. Could you please tell us specifically which activities are within 287-D:20?
So that refers to the taxes on the different games, a 3% tax on your tournament poker games and a 10% tax on all the other games of chance.
So
Follow up?
games of chance.
Right.
So tell me what it's not. It's not sports betting.
No.
It's not the video games.
Right.
It's just
it's roulette, it's cash poker games, it's blackjack.
Okay.
Representative Ames?
Just to make sure I understood, you said $5.3 million in fiscal year 23
Yes,
was the gross, was the revenue that you received,
5.664, and our expenses were $283,000.
which the statute says you are subtracted out.
Yes,
And then that's the money that was sent to the Education Trust Fund. Is
correct. That would be
right?
the portion of our transfer. So approximately $400,000 a month, give or take.
And was that a very low year, or was that a typical year?
That was the highest year of games of chance revenue we've realized, and that was because of the legislatively approved increased bet limit.
So under this bill, if you subtract $6 million from 5.3,
You're negative.
you get the point.
Yes.
Okay, that was very helpful. Representative Ullery?
Just as a hypothetical, up in Milton, somebody won it, what was it, 39 million or something like that?
13.9 million.
13
approximately.
point, I know there was a 3 and a 9 in there. I had all the numbers. The question is, will that increase substantially to the point that we reach the threshold with one big winner?
No, so the Megabucks, it's a Megabucks win. It's a traditional lottery product. It's not under 287. It's in the 284.
Okay.
RSA.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on HB 1517. I'm going to open the hearing on HB 1565. Let's see. I have no pink cards. Do I have someone to introduce? They're coming, okay. Well, I don't know, we might. Well, 15, 17.
Pull them in there because they're done.
This is all 15, 17, yeah. Okay. And I'll recognize Representative Doucette to introduce HB 15.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce House Bill 1565 FN for the committee's consideration.
Thank you. I have a pink card from Colleen Smith from New Hampshire DHHS.
We do have a new fiscal note that got passed around to us.
Okay, and we did, Representative Almy just reminded me we have a new fiscal note on 1565 that got passed around. I don't know if I have it.
Terry's date.
Yes.
Oh, right. All right, okay. Yeah, we have two handouts. We have the fiscal note on HB 1565 and Representative Spilsbury's change of date. Okay, thank you. You can.
Good
start.
afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak on House Bill 1565. My name is Colleen Smith. I'm the administrator for the Department of Health and Human Services Food Protection section, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the fiscal note. We did provide an amended fiscal note due to the bill amendment to the LBA last night. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Representative Almy.
Thank you. The fiscal note says that the amended bill, which got rid of a bunch of other stuff, is going to reduce your revenues by 10,000 a year and possibly increase your expenditures by 10,000 a year.
So those are just estimates. The bill as amended would allow producers of acidified foods to do so without a food license. So right now they have to, if they want to produce these products in a commercial kitchen, they pay a $350 annual fee. So we are not sure how many would opt not to pursue that license. They still could produce through this license should this bill pass, but we had listed that as an estimate and indeterminable because we were not sure how many of those would actually opt out of not needing that license from us. And as far as expenditures, due to this being a higher risk food that would be allowed to be made in a home food kitchen, we could project that there might be more increases of foodborne illness that the department would have to investigate. And that is why we had estimated there might be some additional expenditures due to that work.
Representative Fellows.
Can you just tell us some examples of what are the foods that would not need the licensed kitchen anymore?
So this would allow acidified foods to be made in a home kitchen without a license. An example of that would be pickles or salsa.
Any other questions? Representative Platt.
Would it include tomato products as well? Canned tomato products?
It could. Usually, acidified foods could be tomato products, like a hot sauce that contains mostly tomato products.
Okay. Yes, Representative Leapley.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get a broader idea of what acidified foods are. So would this include like kombucha or yogurt or like kefir?
So these wouldn't be fermented products like those. These would be foods where you're adding acid to bring the natural pH down.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you. I'm wondering, like, especially when you mentioned tomatoes, like canned tomatoes, will it be necessary for your agency to do more inspections of these products when you find them in a I don't know, wherever you check them? Because right now that they should have had a license to produce them, but now they might be
That's actually a policy question.
Well, I'm asking, no, because excuse me, I'm thinking in terms of more inspections or more time to make inspections because these products will need a closer look.
No.
Would that impact the
So
budget?
So actually, because these products would be exempt from our license and inspection, there wouldn't be an anticipated cost due to increased inspection.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to close the public hearing on HB 1565. I forgot to ask if anyone else wants to testify on HB 1565. Okay. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Representative Spilsbury, did you want to speak on the amendment?
Very quickly,
Can
couldn't
we-
be simpler. Chairman Aaron of Agriculture Environment simply pointed out that in the course of amending the bill in their committee, they had inadvertently left out the 60-day effective dates. So she asked me to do the favor of having this amendment prepared, non-controversial. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So there. Oh, okay. There you go. 1709. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing on HB 1709 and recognize Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm recovering from a little cold, so I'll keep my mask on. I'll try to speak loud and clearly, but if for any reason you need to hear me, just let me know. So as I passed around, wasn't sure if you had already received it in your packet, but I passed along the amended fiscal note as we amended it in the House 2 weeks ago. This bill no longer has any fiscal impact. I want to make sure you saw that before I presented it. But if you have any questions on the bill or anything I can answer, please let me know.
Thank you. That yes, just to highlight that again, there is no fiscal note on this. This bill technically could have been waived and not even come to this committee. So, but with that, if anyone has any questions, I don't see any questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to close the public hearing on HB 1709. Yes, Representative Ullery.
Considering the seals with the forest, maybe we should take a trip up and see what a forest looks like.
Mr. Chair, I can't tell the forest from the trees.
Well, then, okay, then I guess the trip's not necessary. All right, we have one bill left, but we can't start for another 9 minutes. You have,
Maybe take the children to the forest. There's a German children's story about kids in forests and gingerbread and ovens and
Mr. Chair,
yes.
I'd just like to apologize for interrupting you. What I was trying to ask is, what I was thinking is that they would need to test those products to see if they really were acidified to whatever level of acid, would qualify as acidified. That's what I was thinking. They might need more inspectors or take longer to do inspections.
Thank you. Oh, I see. She left. I'm going to open the public hearing on HB 1611 and invite up Representative Wellner.
Thank you, Chairman Janigan and members of the Ways and Means Committee. I guess, and congratulations are in place for the chairman who's now taken over this position. Thank you. So this bill, actually, if you look at the bill, you'll see it says it was, the first committee was Health and Human Services, and it got sent instead to the Special Child Care Committee. And I'm on that committee, so, and I'm also one of the co-sponsors. And Rebecca McWilliams, who is the prime sponsor of this bill, couldn't be with us today. So I will just briefly tell you what happened at the Special Child Care Committee. We did do a couple of fairly minor amendments to the bill. One of them maybe isn't so minor. The way the bill was originally written was that this special child care fund could be used to make direct payments to child care employees for things like the cost of health insurance, the cost of benefit type things that they might need. What we did in the special committee was we amended it to have these grants going to the employer, and then the employer would work with the employees in providing incentives for the employees. The major issue behind the bill is to retain our child care workforce. I'm sure all of you have probably seen articles, heard news reports that the child care workforce is in desperate shape. We've lost many employees in that area, and it's so important because without the child care workforce, you can't have people working in other businesses that are so important to this committee, because you're the Ways and Means Committee and you're looking for businesses in New Hampshire to pay their business taxes. Then the only other, I think, small amendment that we added was that the Department of Health and Human Services would develop the rules around this fund. There is no appropriation into this fund at this time. This is basically a fund being set up in anticipation that in the future there will be funds available for workforce. In the last budget in House Bill 2, there was a $15 million appropriation made to the child care workforce. And if this bill had been in place, it would have gone into that fund. It would go into this fund. So in anticipation that in the future there will be funds available for the child care workforce, this just sets up a fund for how those would be distributed. There's a lot of talk about the child care workforce at both the state and federal level, anticipating that there will be more funds available to retain and encourage people to go into the child care and making child care a career. So I will just close there, and maybe you have questions about it.
Representative Platt.
I read the bill, Representative Wallner, and I didn't see non-lapsing anywhere, so it is a lapsing fund?
No.
Dedicated?
No, it should be a non-lapsing fund.
Representative Almy? Okay. All right. Yes, Representative Leapley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Wellner, for taking my question. In your work on the commission, did you come across existent federal grants that are available for this, or is this something we're hoping for in the future?
I think this is just something, no, I did not come across
Okay.
any specific federal money at this point. But there is so much talk about the childcare workforce and what's happening, not just in New Hampshire, but nationwide. It is a very low wage profession, and we're having a really hard time recruiting people to go into this workforce, and then once we get them there, retaining them. So we need to find some ways to encourage people to come to this workforce.
Follow up?
Please. The other question I had is line 27 and line 30 talks about childcare tuition assistance. My understanding of that is if a parent were working in childcare, that it would help pay for their childcare somewhere else. My question is, it does say job-related education expenses. I'm wondering how that's characterized. If a childcare worker were working on a degree, a BA or associate's degree, how would that be? What would job related mean?
Job related, I think would mean there are certain requirements in licensing for what you need in order to be a child care provider. And then ongoing, you have to have so many hours every year of training. So I think those job related expenses around that would be covered. As people try to move up a career ladder and maybe go from having just a few college credits in child development, maybe they move on to an associate's degree. I think that's where we really would look to the department in the promulgation of rules around how that would be handled.
Thank you.
Representative Almy.
Thank you. On this, on what is this eligible individual employee? Because you've empowered an eligible individual employee whose employer didn't want to join the program to get on a health savings account, insurance, all sorts of things.
So this actually, and I'm sorry I forgot this one. This actually came up at the Special Child Care Committee. That part was not in the original bill. And there was some concern among the members of the committee that since we were going to make these contributions directly to the employer, there might be some employers, for whatever reason, that might not want to do this. Maybe they didn't feel they had the administrative bandwidth to do it. Whatever their reason might be, they would not do it. So in order to be sure that this would be available to anyone working in the childcare field, not just those whose their employer chose to do this, that paragraph was added so that it means that if I worked in a childcare facility that didn't participate in this program as a childcare professional, I could apply on my own. And I think that's another place where we would have to promulgate some rules.
Follow up on, I think it's more than rules, because on this individual employee has to go straight to the department, and the department is saying they aren't going to have a cost because it's all going to be put off on this entity that they pick to do the work.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm not following the question.
On Well, we have a,
Representative Ames?
I don't think the fiscal note says that the department will not incur costs in relationship to processing an employee. It says that the costs are indeterminable because they don't know
Right.
the number of employers who won't participate.
Right. Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Schoenberg?
Yes. Thank you for taking my question, Representative. You mentioned on line 15, grants shall be awarded, and then you mentioned flexible funding on line 16. For informational purposes, what do you see the total grant cost to be for an employer? What is the cost for childcare overall?
The cost for childcare overall? Oh, you mean the whole universe of childcare? In New Hampshire, and I think that we actually have people that are going to speak after me that can really probably give you that information better than I can. But in New Hampshire, I think what it's costing for a preschool child in a child care center probably averages around $15,000 a year. Babies obviously cost more because the staff-child ratio is much different. You have to have one staff member for every 4 babies. For a 4-year-old, you need one staff member for every 10 or 12 children. So there's a little bit different cost depending on the age of the child, but it's very expensive.
Representative Almy.
thank you. Is there any indication of what entity would take this on? And would it only happen if they found a pocket of money to do it?
I think there are groups that would be capable of taking on a project like this. And, I couldn't specifically say who they are, but I think that there would be groups that would be able to handle this kind of a program.
I'll get you in a minute. I just want to let the committee know I have 6 more pink cards from those who want to testify. And
Well, I've got one more question
Yeah.
that
Oh, well.
actually I think the representative should be able to answer, which is there was 15 million that was put in the budget for child care. Do you know how it was spent and who spent it?
Yes, it was appropriated to Health and Human Services. It was $15 million for the workforce. The Department of Health and Human Services has not finalized the grants at this point. I don't know whether the department is going to speak today or not, but they could probably give you a lot more information about where they are in the process. But it was a $15 million appropriation for the biennium. So they have time to get those grants out to the employers.
And
follow
up, is that lapsing?
No, I don't believe it
It's
is a lapsing
non-lapsing.
fund.
Thank you.
okay, seeing no more questions, thank you very much. Next I have, let me just say, I've got 6 pink cards here. I think everyone is aware that this policy has passed, so we don't need to talk about policy so much. I think we understand the need. So our charter here is to focus on the cost. Next, I'm going to call up Will Stewart. Please turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Good.
Perfect.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Will Stewart, and I'm the executive director of Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire, which is a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people here in the Granite State, which is the second oldest state in the country. And certainly don't want to go over all the reasons, why this is a good idea policy-wise. As you mentioned, this has been decided in that regard. That said, I do want to say that, I think this is, one of the smartest investments the state can make. At Stay Work Play, we've been going all around the state, these past couple of months. Last week, we were in the Mount Washington Valley in the Lakes region. Tonight, we're going to be in Dover. We are hearing about childcare everywhere we go. The expense, that it poses to young families and people who want to start young families, if they can even find it. So I won't, remunerate too many more of the reasons. Just want to express our full support for this bill and its funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Schamberg.
One question. Thank you for taking my question. Is cost different in different parts of their state here for childcare?
I would leave that specific question to some of the experts behind me, but that certainly seems to be the case anecdotally that I hear. But it's expensive no matter where it seems to be, based on the wages that people make in different parts of the state as well.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I have Jackie Cowell.
Good afternoon. How do you do? My name is Jackie Cowell. I'm the executive director of Early Learning New Hampshire. We are a statewide nonprofit working around childcare issues here in our state. And so if I may ask a question, Chairman.
Sure.
We do have a few people here who've traveled far who just very briefly want to talk about the policy. They're not experts in the finance of this or the cost of this. Would it be okay if they just took a minute or so? They're here, part of those pink cards, sometimes for the first time, and they wouldn't be able to answer the question about the financing. Would it be okay if they still spoke?
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And so I know the department is here as well to talk about what they feel is the fiscal impact for them. The way this was drafted, and we really talked with, this is a bipartisan bill, as you know. It was originally a bipartisan bill that passed unanimously, as you know, out of the House Special Committee on a bipartisan basis as well. And so it was really clear that this was the year to establish the fund, get it ready. As Representative Wallner said, perhaps there might be some federal funding coming within the next year before the next biennium budget is passed. And so it would be up and running and ready to receive those funds. And again, it would be understood that there is an administrative piece to any federal funds that come that DHHS can use to administer. Also, as we mentioned, with the entity with a contract with DHHS would be able to take whatever funding is passed next year during the budget cycle, if any. The legislature would have its determination. When we were talking with Senator Bradley, for instance, and Senator Innes and a few others, they were very clear that this is the year to set the fund up, to that infrastructure, and next year, if possible, to bring in some possibilities of some funding for that fund. So my hope is, again, next year when that funding is determined what it would be, there would be a piece of that funding that would automatically go to the administration. It wouldn't be an extra cost. That would be my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
you. Next, I have a pink card for Samantha Medeiros. Hopefully I said that correctly.
You got it. I will be very brief because my testimony was mostly focused on policy. So I really do thank you for your time to hear my story. I come from Midstate Health Center. We run a childcare center that is located in Plymouth, New Hampshire. So we have just over 60 children. And I just want to share this brief story that's just really showcasing why this is so, so important. Recently, one of our infant room teachers has left us. She's relocating down south for a better paying career, not in childcare. This has caused us to have to prepare some of our families to cut our infant room attendance in half. So that's really impacting not just the center's finances to stay open and pay the rest of our staff, but also these families who are relying on us for childcare. We've struggled immensely to find replacement. As you know, recruiting is challenging, but retaining the staff that we can get is extremely important. So wage increases, PTO, health insurance, all of these things are so critically important to make sure that those staff we can get on are staying with us and taking care of the families in our community. With that, I won't go on anymore, but I really do thank you for hearing our story.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next, I have Lynn Ouellette.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us. My name is Lynn Ouellette. I'm the director of Nellie's Treehouse in Amherst, New Hampshire, and I've been in the field of early childhood for 41 years. I just wanted to take an opportunity to have an understanding of why the funds are needed. So recently we just released re-registration paperwork, and in order to balance giving our staff an annual raise or allowing our parents to be able to pay for their childcare, instead of raising our rates to 15%, we had to raise them to 8% to try to balance. Parents can't afford to pay more, but these staff deserve to make a living wage. They work hard, and they're taking care of our youngest citizens who need consistency and love. And so having a fund that would allow us to support our staff, whether it's through their insurance, would be very beneficial, not just to us, but to the families of New Hampshire. And I thank you for taking time to listen to us.
Thank you. Representative Platt.
Partially because my ears are plugged and partially because you were going fast. You are director of what treehouse?
Nellie's Treehouse.
Nellie, N-E-L-L-I?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Orrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for taking my question. So how is the money drawn from the fund to pay certain employees, and who makes those decisions?
So at this point, that hasn't been decided. Like Jackie said, it's just we are in the process of trying to get this fund set up so we can make those decisions and hopefully work with DHHS to determine what those rules will be and how that fund will go. But it will go to the employer to help fund maybe insurance or other benefits for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have two more pink cards. I've got next Leanna Lorden.
Good afternoon. My name is Leanna Lorden, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at White Birch Center in Henniker. I've been there for the past 14 years and have been in every position there. And I do appreciate you listening to our stories. Specifically, mine will speak to the workforce and my tenure in the field of early childhood. We all know the pandemic reinforced and deepened public understanding of the essential role of early care and education, working families, and the economy, and ultimately a system that has been deeply underfunded and undervalued. For example, in 2019, the median wage for childcare workers in New Hampshire was $11.69. For preschool teachers, the median wage is $14.43. And New Hampshire early educators with a bachelor's degree are paid 22.5% less than their colleagues who work in a K-8 public education school system. That last statistic has always really resonated with me, not in the best ways, but because I myself hold a bachelor's degree in elementary education, graduating from college with the hope and dream to be a public school teacher. it's still something that I hold current today. But being, having experienced those lower wages compared to my colleagues, and even more so when I began back in this field in 2010, it was solely because there weren't any district positions available. I went from teaching 5th grade in Concord to not having any district positions being available. So my starting hourly wage at White Birch Community Center was $9.75 compared to the $20 per hour that roughly I was making within the public school sector. So I had to settle, so I thought, for a toddler classroom teaching position, which that opportunity, however, held the silver lining, leading me straight to where I am today. So again, this fund and this bill would really sustain the workforce that is incredibly critical for the workforce behind the workforce. Thank you for your time and happy to accept questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Elberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but a comment. I want to thank you all for coming here. I'm a first turn rep, so I understand the first time. Please make sure that you keep in touch with us and your own legislators about issues that matter to you, because in fact, we do listen. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Platt.
I try to listen, but sometimes you're too fast for me to keep up with typing. So you said something about $11 something pay. Repeat the numbers slowly, please.
Sure. So in 2019, the median wage for childcare workers in the state was $11.69.
Okay.
I do also have written testimony that you can have as well, if that helps.
Thank you.
That's perfect.
That would be
You're
great.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, and the last card I have is Amanda Sears.
Good afternoon, and thank you, members of the committee, for hearing our testimony. My name is Amanda Sears, and I'm the New Hampshire State Director for the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. I will try not to talk about the importance of the policy, although that is really hard. So I'll try to stay on some of the economic reasons to advance this setup for this policy right now. And I do just want to add a little bit to some of the things we've heard about. Representative Wallner mentioned that it is very expensive for families to access childcare at the moment. If you have 2 kids under the age of 4 right now in the state, that's about $25,000 per year, just to give you a sense of how expensive that is. Which for the average working family can be, half of a person's income or more. But for the median person, and that's just to get out the door and have your kids taken care of for the day so that you can go to work. Somebody else mentioned that this workforce is the workforce behind the workforce. And so every person that we have working in childcare, that equates to about 8 families that can go to work. And what is happening right now is that because of the workforce shortage that we have in childcare, centers across the state, almost every center you speak to will say that they have empty classrooms right now and a wait list that is hundreds of kids long. And the reason for that is the empty classrooms are, of course, not because of demand, but because they can't find staff. And every classroom that they have to close means families that then are unable to go to work because they don't have care for their kids, or are looking for unsafe places to put their kids because they have to get out the door and go to work. And so they end up leaving their kids in situations that they wouldn't otherwise consider to be ideal. And so in order to set up this fund, this is, it's really not just about boosting childcare, but it's about ensuring that every sector in our economy has the workforce that they need. Because, as I said, 1 person in this sector means 8 other people can go to work in the state. The speaker before me referenced some data about wages, and you might see that, and I think it was a 2018 or 19 number, and think, oh, that's a long time ago. It's probably inflated a lot since then. I do know that the most recent wage data, which is 2022 data, is that it was $13.78 that the average child care worker in New Hampshire is making. And if you think about the inflation in wages over the past couple of years in things like retail, for example, what has happened, because childcare wages wages have not inflated in the same way is that people are leaving childcare to go work at Dunkin' Donuts or at Target or at Walmart, and are really drawing folks away from the workforce sector. And so if you look at the fact that the current costs for families are already so high, the wages are so low, and they have all that competition. That's why this kind of a fund is needed. In terms of setup, I know, Representative, you had asked about the sort of rules and the mechanism for getting the resources into the hands of employees. And I think that while the policy doesn't get into a lot of detail about that, I think that there are models in the New Hampshire, in other New Hampshire policies that can be looked at for that. One, for example, and I'm sort of policy neutral about what these different policies are, but just in terms of mechanism, the voucher system, for example, that's used in public in education for school-aged kids, that system is one system where resources are getting out to individual families who choose to do something other than the public school sector. So there are models that you can look at in New Hampshire policy for this kind of sort of quasi-government or separate from governmental, but like a system where there is a fund administrator that administers getting funds out to individuals for resources, like this. So I would encourage you to, if you believe that there is more definition needed at this stage in the policy, I think there's places you could look for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Ors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks for taking my question.
Yeah.
So how much are you hoping to raise the hourly rate for these individuals by through the fund?
Yeah, that's a good question, and thank you. Honestly, enough to be competitive is the best answer I can give. I've neglected to say, but in Maine and Vermont last year in 2023, both of those states passed policies to inject resources into wages for their childcare workforces, and Massachusetts already had. And so, and that the length of our borders means that if having all three of those states have boosts to the workforce resources, we need to be able to be competitive with those states so that people don't just go across the border and work there, which is what's happening now. The people that want to stay in the sector but feel like they can't afford to in New Hampshire are going across the border. And so I think that we need to look at making sure that we can raise rates to be competitive with those states. And I think that, I believe $5 is sort of the an extra $5, an hour is what would make us competitive with those states because we are so far behind right now.
Follow up?
Follow up?
Yeah, so I would say your analysis is correct because I'm thinking where I live in Chichester, Route 9 that goes through there. I mean, McDonald's, the Weather Vane, they're advertising $18 an hour. So I'm sympathetic to what you're trying to do. It's just I don't know how you really solve it. Maybe this is an answer, but those kind of jobs are, who needs minimum wage when they're paying $18 an hour? And here you folks are trying to raise it. Tough situation. So very sympathetic to what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think if there's no more questions, we'll hear from DHHS next. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Brian Clark, General Counsel for the Division of Economic Stability on behalf of DHHS, and I have with me
Jesse Davis, and I am the Bureau Chief of Child Development and Head Start Collaboration for DHHS.
Thank you very much. And I'll ask you both when you're done, just fill out a pink card. Or if you already have, great. So I don't know if you guys want to say something or you want questions. Did you have some initial statements? Or?
Well, I guess I would just say we're here to answer questions about the cost. Ultimately, we couldn't determine what the cost would be. A general rule of thumb that we use in estimating the cost of administering funds like this is 10%. But since there's no appropriation or identified funding, we couldn't really give you a number. But we're available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Representative Leapley.
Thank you. I was just doing some quick research while the previous speakers were speaking, and it seems like the federal government is increasing the block grants to the states slightly, but my assumption is that most of the block grants that we get, it looks like the kind of thing that supports families, low-income families can get a subsidy from the from DHHS to send their kids, which provides some stability to the daycare that's accepting, right? And some stability to the families. But it seems like the approach here is a little bit different, supporting the daycare provider directly to be able to support their employees, to keep their education up to date, to grow their education. So am I right? Or does it look like there might be another source of federal funding that could go into an account such as the one we're trying to establish? Thank you.
So there are opportunities through the CCDF funding to support the workforce. The majority of the funding goes, as you said, to eligible families who are low income and require subsidy to be able to afford the cost of care. So that's a really complex question. If they put more dollars into the CCDF fund, that may expand eligibility for low income families, but it doesn't necessarily increase the cost to the child care program for that slot. There's been a couple of questions about the cost of care, and that's a really challenging question to answer nationally. And part of that is because families cannot afford the true cost of care, and so child care programs are charging much less in order to be able to have families have access to services. This year is the first year that a narrow cost analysis is required by the federal government to get closer to that number so that we can understand the cost of care. So this is very complex. I did have a meeting with the senator's office last week talking about this specific issue of the federal government needing to call out the child care workforce more specifically. But at this time, there are no federal dollars specifically appropriated to the child care workforce.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Schamberg, followed by Representative Representative Ullery.
All right, thank you, Representative Schamberg. On your fiscal note, it indicates under the question, does this bill provide sufficient funding to cover estimated expenditures? But you don't know what the estimated expenditures are, so you mark this no. What type of expenditures would you anticipate if, say, $10 came in from monopoly money from the federal government?
Well, so the expenditures would be to contract with a designated entity to administer the fund. That's going to be what the expenditure is for.
And what requirements would this entity have? You'd have to go through that process. What would the time commitment be to set up the rules as to who's going to be providing it, how it's going to be provided, how it's going to be administered? What is the time commitment for that? Do you have an estimate of that?
So rulemaking would take several months. The bill is supposed to be effective January 1st, 2025. So if the bill passes quickly and there's funding available, we will start right away. But 6 months for rulemaking would be
Follow up?
If funding is available.
Yes.
And if funding is not available, we have a dedicated fund with no money in it that does nothing.
Yes.
Representative Schamberg, followed by Representative Doucette.
Yes, I guess, thank you for taking my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question to the department is, why are all these administered by third party and not done internally?
Well, the bill before us specifically says that the department will designate a third party. The initial draft did have the department administering the funds. So the reason it says that is because the committee drafted it that way.
Representative Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. We heard some testimony. There was some $15 million that the department received last year. Is this going to leave a void? And we also heard testimony that those $15 million would, if this fund was established, would be shifted over there. I'm wondering whether it's going to leave a void. 15 million was spent on something, and I know it wasn't some of these, I'm guessing it's not one of these specifics that are laid out in this piece of legislation. And how are you going to backfill that gap with those dollars that you received?
So the $15 million appropriation, we are calling the Child Care Workforce Grant. That application period closed February 23rd, and the department is going through applications in that process right now. And many of the same expenses can be used that are written in this bill for that funding as well. By the time this fund got appropriations allocated to it, that 15 million would be expended.
Follow up?
So I probably misunderstood. So it's a one-time grant you received.
Yes.
Representative Leapley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking a question. I'm assuming that you're reviewing applications, but you already have parameters of what you think are appropriate ways to spend that money. Do some of those overlap with what we're discussing here? Or are they different? And can you kind of enumerate some of those just so we can understand differences and overlaps? And then another question is, it sounds like you're administering the $15 million.
The department is administering the $15 million. And unfortunately, I did not come prepared with all of the ways that you can spend the current grant dollars, but they are very similar. And we will know July 2024 is the first reporting period on the $15 million funds to know how those funds were used for those programs. So we, at this point, don't have information to share.
Representative Almy.
Yeah, thank you. I've got two things, but one of them is on this, so I want to stay on it. There is no way that you are allowed to use part of this 15 million to get the rules written so that you can start the other program. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you aren't going to do it unless someone will give you money?
If this bill passes, I believe that then we would have to solve the problem of getting the rules written and how we would administer the program, whether it would be with a third-party entity, whether it would be the department. I can't answer that question specifically at this time.
So there are a couple of things in this bill that you have already said on, you, or just said you might not want to do, but they're in the bill, so you'd have to if we passed it. One of them is that on handing it over to an independent entity. And the other one is this business about an eligible individual employee that can't get his employer to do it. And you seem to be, you would have to work directly with these eligible individual employees. And it looks like it would have to be outside of that other designated entity. So I'm not quite sure how that one works and whether you would want us to change some of the language. Or how can we make sure that this thing can get done?
Yes, that's correct. So when I read that, my understanding was that if an eligible employee applied for funding to do, let's say, tuition assistance for professional education, and the employer didn't want to participate for some reason, the employee could apply directly to the department instead of the designated entity for funding. And so the impact of that is really too difficult to determine. We could do it. We would need to write administrative rules on how you apply, where the funding, how we would be able to draw down from that. But we're not sure what percentage of employees would have to go that route, if any.
Follow up?
Thank you. Do you have some idea of what the difficulties might be? For instance, let's take all of the garages in New Hampshire. Most of them are 3 to 6 employees, I think. Maybe they go up to 10. That could be a lot of bureaucratic work for them that they aren't really equipped to handle. Of course, only 1 or 2 probably per garage would have kids. So, but that's a lot of individuals who could apply, as I understand it, as an individual employee, and you'd be responsible for them.
I'm unsure of the question, but yes, there are some complexities in this bill that would need to have careful consideration during rulemaking. I think that I was at the special committee on childcare when they added that. It went over about an hour. And I think the intent of this bill is to really support the workforce. And if an employer did not want to opt into this opportunity, they didn't want the employees to not have that benefit. And so this was the way that they were trying to ensure that the childcare workers had access to this fund.
Yes, but could you handle it?
I will say that we would need more employees for the complexity of this particular fund.
Representative Spilsbury.
Am I correctly understanding that the only employers we're talking about here who can apply are daycare employers? We're not talking about employers around the economy or employers of people who have children in daycare. We're talking about people who employ daycare workers.
Yes. So it says childcare programs operating with an active childcare license or that are license exempt and enrolled in the Department of Health and Human Services Childcare Scholarship Program. That's about 600 programs out of the 700-ish that are in New Hampshire.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if since the source of funds for this could be any private, state, or federal money, that maybe what it can be used for needs to include some kind of flexibility to it, because, you know, a private donation or federal money, they're going to tell you how they think the money ought to be spent. And the other question is, when money comes in from federal and private sources, is it going to be clear when it should go into this fund versus maybe some other programs you already have at your agency related to childcare?
So currently for the workforce, we really only have one funding stream that is not affiliated from the state. And so that's somewhat of a complex question for me to answer because I didn't write this bill, but I assume that any private donor investing money in this fund would understand that it would go to the childcare workforce for these reasons.
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on HB 1611? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. So, thank you, everyone. That concludes today's agenda. Tomorrow, as you know, we're meeting starting at 9:30. We have a work session, and then at 1 o'clock, 1:30, we have our exec session. And as for next week, I'm going to schedule Monday. I don't know yet whether Wednesday is necessary, but at least Monday at this point and possibly Wednesday. Tuesday is election day, so we won't be having anything else. Thank you.
You know how to clear a room, Mr. Chairman.